So, you want a Honda Grom, but you don't feel like paying 20% APR for a new one, and you don't have the spare cash for a used specimen. Rest assured, Xi Jinping hears your prayers and bestoweth upon us the Boom Vader. But what is a Boom Vader? Well, it would be like if you went to the Honda dealership and said, "Hello, I would like one Honda Grom, but hold the Honda and hold the Grom." All jokes aside, let's be grateful the Chinese haven't made a cheap Nabby clone yet. Anyways, this thing. Why is it in my garage? Well, it is complicated. Long story short, I bought a Kawasaki Concourse with lots of issues, which I have since learned is the motorcycle equivalent of buying a Tesla in terms of asset depreciation. I did get it running, however, only to realize the spark plug holes had a slightly higher than spec amount of oil in them. Set on not losing money, I traded this $800 bike for $400 worth of guitars and amps. Yeah, to be honest, I took a risk trading for something that I knew nothing about, and at the time I thought it was a fair trade. So naturally, the only thing I can think to rectify this situation is to trade the guitars and amps for a bike, since I have half a chance at being able to flip a bike and fix it up. I don't care about making money here, but I'll be damned if I take a loss, so here is my 2018 Boom Vader. From the moment I saw this thing, I knew it lived a hard life. It was quite literally left out in the rain. The guy I got it from was very nice, but he told me that he didn't know much about bikes, he just liked riding them. And he was definitely not the first owner. I bought it in non-running condition, and here is a list of issues it has just at a glance. The battery is dead. The meter was the victim of a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick to the dick and balls. The clutch is funky. Everything else is also funky. Chain is loose. The headlight is aimed at the nearest commercial airliner at any given time. The original owner did not get the luxury air intake option. And least consequential of them all, the wiring appears to have been done in a way that would make an OSHA manual somewhere burst into flames. Now that every single issue is known, we can continue forward with getting it started for the first time without any surprise. And the head gasket is fucked. Now, to be completely fair, it did run a little on starter fluid, and I'm not sure if the head gasket was blown before and it just so happened to start mattering after a few starting attempts, or I may have loaded the cheap Chinese clone with half a gallon of the most volatile substance in my garage and that was just too much. We will truly never know. Luckily, because it's a cheap Chinese clone, OEM parts are easily and readily accessible, and by OEM parts, I mean parts that are also manufactured in China. So, after a short trip to the dealer's OEM website, I had the parts in no time. Now, after seeing a puff of smoke blast out the side of the motor, I was pretty sure the head gasket had failed, but in the true spirit of education, I did also test the compression. My suspicions were confirmed when the field sobriety test resulted in a meager 50 psi, which is roughly a third to a quarter of what it should be. There totally wasn't any other possible reason for this reading. Now, some gentle disassembly was in order, which thankfully involved legitimately 2 actual pieces of hardware holding the entire tank and front shrouds on. Not by design, but by pure blissful chance. Next, I removed the carburetor, during the process of which I discovered my least favorite thing about the Boom Vader, or at least one of them. It doesn't have a petcock, i.e. you remove the carburetor and the process will involve spilling gas everywhere 100% of the time, unless you get something fancy like a rag or a drain pan or something. Also worth noting is that as far as I know, a service manual does not exist anywhere for one of these, or if it did, I missed it in the 2 entire whole minutes I dedicated out of my day to looking for one. So if you are more experienced than me, and it looks to you like I'm quite literally just unbolting shit until I get where I need to be, then you'd be absolutely correct, and this method definitely did not backfire at all, and I definitely know what every part in this motor is. Totally unrelated to the previous statement, I found the cam chain tensioner. Like, this looks like a cam chain tensioner. That's what it looks like. But it's at such a weird angle. You know, fuck it, whatever. What's the worst that can happen? This will be a learning experience. That looks important. All right. I'll put that with the other important looking stuff. This, as it turns out, was not the cam chain tensioner. Essentially, this is not a cam chain tensioner like I thought it was. It is a little tiny plastic roller that basically keeps the cam chain from touching. And that's all fine and dandy. But when I just willy-nilly undid this bolt, I kind of fucked myself because I'm not going down that far. So let me try to pick that back into place before I do anything else. Because if I lose that in the motor, then I am going to have to take the whole fucking motor apart. Okay, I think I got it. I will make sure to check when I get the rest of the motor apart. But I think I've saved myself some undue headaches here. Now, two things. Firstly, the Boom Vader does not have one. In fact, apparently, most of these small bikes don't. Second, why was I looking for one? Well, my only valve adjustment and top-end experience up until this point was bikes like the KZ650 or YZ426, where you take the cams out to take the cam chain off to take the head off. This machine does not do that. Whoops. Also, vaguely related was the observation that the exhaust was just kind of there. One of these studs was, in fact, a bolt and not at all tight, and the other remaining stud and nut were tight enough, I guess, but it definitely wasn't seated right. Once the exhaust was off, the head came right off. I put the new head gasket in place, and now the reassembly portion could begin. Soon after using my 25-cent Harbor Freight pick as a pry bar, I was able to seat the cam gear back in its place. Thankfully for me, the Chinese anticipated a white southerner working on it and idiot-proofed it. It was also during this reassembly portion I realized the intake just didn't come with a gasket on it. So I made one out of gasket maker and remembered why I don't do that, and made one out of, get this, gasket sheet that I already had. After the motor was back together, I hooked the trusty jump box up, turned it to the full 110 amp car start setting because fuck it, why not, and was immediately presented with a peculiar sight. Yeah, so it is just blowing fuel the complete opposite way it's supposed to go. Just in case that was a Chinese thing, you know, other side of the world and all that, I decided to check a few other things. And by a few other things, I mean I checked spark. For what it's worth, it was a clean, bright blue spark, and yes, I did this just after pumping that entire half of my garage with a perfect 14.4 to 1 mist, so what? Then I had a brilliant idea. It seemed to be that the fuel was the issue now, and since it was blowing out the intake, I decided the best solution for testing purposes was to just blow it back into the intake with more starting fluid. To my surprise, this actually did work, and we got our first real start. Kinda.
God, it smells like shit.
It still wasn't idling and running consistently whatsoever. Luckily, I did have a theory. See, engines work on suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Engines are just air pumps, and it becomes way simpler to troubleshoot one when you treat them as such. A four-stroke motor is designed so that when the piston is returning to bottom dead center after the exhaust stroke, it is pulling in fresh air and fuel. It can do this because the intake valve opens at just the right time. My theory was the valve was actually staying slightly open, not enough for the piston to hit it, but enough so that when it entered the compression stroke, it would blow air out the intake, which would explain the gas baptism of my camera. Armed with that theory, I went back into the motor. The smallest feeler gauge I had was a .0015, and I could not force it under the rocker. Both the intake and exhaust were like this. With this discovery, I adjusted the clearances to what the people on Reddit said the spec was, and I immediately noticed a drastic improvement.
It feels like way stronger compression.
To check our results and rule anything else out, I did another compression test, this time achieving 190 psi, which by all accounts for a cold Chinese motor is a fucking miracle. Finally, after a few working hours, it was time.
Alrighty.
It idled, it ran consistent, Granted, it took throttle about as well as you'd expect from a bike that was running open carb. Now that I had it running, I decided to change the oil, which to no one's surprise was a less than ideal shade of whitish brown. While the melted ice cream was draining, I decided to gently remove the headlight assembly. From there, I was able to remove the meter just as seamlessly, only to discover that it was full of fucking spiders.
Oh, there's multiple friends in here. Oh my god.
Since I was having an issue with the meter anyways, and I never wanted to put my hands near it ever again, I decided to just fix the headlight mounting and move on to some more routine maintenance, like the chain. This is just a word of advice if you own a Vader or any of these other Chinese bikes, but do please check the tightness often. Not necessarily the chain, although you do need to check the tightness of that. I'm talking about the axle. When I started adjusting the chain, I noticed the swing arm was kind of bent in where the axle goes through, and I figured someone just impacted the shit out of it, but no, it really is just that weak, and when you tighten the axle bolt, it will bend in the swing arm, so just watch that, or don't. Flash forward a few days, and I got the new meter in the mail. I did plenty of research and dug through plenty of forums to find a good replacement. Since people on the internet are never wrong and always remember exactly what they bought, I was sure it was going to be an easy plug and play.
Things aren't quite lining up here. And I'm pretty disappointed because it was advertised as fitting this specific bike. I don't know, I'm going to plug up and see what does or doesn't work.
Well, I plugged in what I could and rewired what I couldn't, and by rewired I mean I literally just cut the male end off and spliced it onto the female end so that it would plug in. However, unfortunately, it was not so simple. While I brainstormed the meter issue, I decided to move on to the clutch issue so that I could at least ride it and make sure it didn't have any other major issues. After fitting a different cable to it, it just barely operated the clutch, although I did discover a neat auto throttle feature during my testing. Naturally, with the clutch hardly operational, the throttle sticking, and the brakes still sucking, it was a perfect time to take it on a test ride. In the snow and ice.
Whew. And yes, it's a little bit cold out. Okay, front brakes suck, rear brakes also suck. But the Grom has moved. I say Grom, you know what I mean. Oh dear, this is all ice. Alright. The ticking of the valves will be our tachometer. I don't know how much gas I have. Please tell me I'm not already out of gas. Dude, please. 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 Superman. Please. Also, I should tell you, these tires do not have much air in them. If I had to guess right now, I would say about 7 foot-pounds. Jesus Christ. I'd say about 7 pounds.
And yes, while I wish I was making this up, I did in fact forget to check if I had any gas in it and proceeded to run out of gas when it was 15 degrees outside. I ended up getting my piss bottle, and by piss bottle, I mean I walked all the way back up to my house, chugged a bottle of water, I pissed, filled the empty bottle up with gas, and then walked all the way back to the bike. So I just ran it on that little bottle until I got back up to the house. Fast forward another 2 days when I actually had time to work on it again, and I decided the clutch issue would take priority. From what I could tell, there was nothing wrong with the clutch itself, just the cable being too long. I ended up replacing the cable again, this time with one from a DT400 that I just kind of had laying around, and it worked well enough, so I went with it. Before going on another test ride, I decided to check the brake fluid since the brakes kind of sucked, and upon checking the brake fluid, I quickly reminded myself why I don't do that. Once the brake fluid was flushed, I went on another test ride, which according to my camera, took place on the surface of the fucking sun. I swear this was not done in editing. My main theory is that I turned the camera on in the garage where it was way darker, and since so much light is reflecting off the snow, it overexposed the camera. I did briefly try to rectify it, but then I remembered that I have no idea how to use Premiere Pro. I had also noticed at this point that the forks did make contact with the air filter, not to mention the air filter was just kind of out there, exposed to the elements. So I hatched a plan that involved me going to AutoZone, buying a flexible radiator hose that I drastically overestimated the flexibility of, returning said hose, driving to Napa, rummaging through their back room wall full of radiator hoses, and picking one out based on the 3D model of a Boom Vader I had in my head spinning around like that one fish. Then, bringing that random hose home, realizing the spinning fish memory wasn't 100% accurate, and then bending the hose to fit.
Alright, it reaches a certain point, it really doesn't want to accelerate, which may have something to do with this air duct system.
Upon testing, I came to the shocking realization that if you bend a hose too much and restrict the airflow to the diameter of a hamster's asshole, then it may not be enough for a small motorcycle engine to accelerate past 3,000 RPMs. So back on the lift it went. I ended up cutting the hose and splicing it back together using cut-off sections of a YZ426 exhaust to brace the inner diameter of the hose so that I could put exhaust clamps on it without crushing it. Also, if you were wondering, the hose is to a 1995 to 1997 Ford F-250, just in case anyone wanted to recreate this awesome and practical setup. Also, you may have noticed this giant red thing. Realizing that I had no good way to fit the air filter into the hose since it was the same diameter, I went to True Value, finding literally the only thing that was the same diameter, which happened to be this ball valve. And yes, I did take the air filter with me, and yes, I did put the air filter on pretty much anything phallus-shaped in the entire store. Funnily enough, now I realize that I could have just used part of that YZ426 muffler the same way I did on, the entire rest of the intake, but in the moment I forgot about that, and now I have a kill switch that relies on nothing but air, so that's pretty cool. After my custom air intake, I returned to the thing I was avoiding since I started, which is electrical work. I ended up deciding to repin the connector, which only took about an hour of trial and error and around somewhere between 5 and 20 10-amp fuses. Also, yes, the Vader does not have a fuse box, just a single 10-amp main fuse. I just ended up swapping wires around until it didn't blow that fuse the second I turned the key on, and it worked. Enough. It looked relatively dumb, but the main functionality was there. At long last, it was done. A running and riding Boom Vader. The gear indicator was off by 1 or 2 or 3 gears depending on seemingly absolutely fucking nothing, and the speedometer was as generous as a TikToker's R6. Also, I did have plans to put new tires on it because the rear tire was leaking at the bead, and they were relatively old tires with some minor cracking. Due to 2 different factors, this did not end up happening. Firstly, the leak actually stopped. No idea how, but it did. It just didn't leak anymore. Secondly, and arguably most importantly, the tires never showed up. At the time of writing the script, I have waited over 3 months. The Vader is gone, and I still have no tires. Luckily, I only spent $30 on the set, so it's not a huge loss. I'm sure one day after decades have passed, they will eventually make their way to this house, but who knows. So, did I break even? I have no idea. I traded it for another project bike, so tune in for that video. While this is the end of this video, I would ask that if you stayed this long to stick around for just another few seconds. This video, as simple as it may seem, took a lot of effort. I had to edit down easily 15 to 20 hours or more of footage on top of actually working on the bike and filming, etc. I made the Vader series as I went because I post once a week, but I do prefer this style of video a lot more. If you also like this sort of video more, please let me know by leaving a like. If you like motorcycles and general tomfuckery, I'd appreciate if you took a second to subscribe, as it is entirely free and helps me a ton. I also love comments too. It helps push the video to more people, and I make an effort to respond to everyone I see. YouTube seems to think that you'll like this video, so maybe it's worth a watch. Thanks for watching, and ride safe.